Hello, class. Well, today we are in Chapter 9, Social Activism and Engagement in Introduction to Religious Studies, our class. So let's jump right into it. We're going to talk about three different leaders in three different religions. So let's talk a little bit more about religion. Of course, in this course, we're talking about religious studies. What is it to look at a religion and actually study it? And German philosopher Karl Marx, you can look him up a little bit later, but Karl Marx, and there's a picture of him right there on the screen. We found in this course that it's really difficult to define what religion really is. And Marx said, that religion is the sign of the oppressed creature. He said it's the heart of a heartless world, just just as it is the spirit of a spiritless situation. He also saw religion as a force that pacifies the poor, enabling them to accept their plight in life. He said it also allowed the rich and the privileged people to ignore the needs of the poor. So I want you to think about Marx's definition. You may not adhere to it, but I just want you to think about it. Uh, is there any truth in it to you, perhaps? Or maybe it has no truth to you. But it's interesting how this philosopher, he's not a theologian per se, but a philosopher, sees religion as the sign of oppression or something, but also the heart of a heartless world. It's interesting how some of the things that Marx says we can kind of see in our daily lives and in culture, right? We can kind of see how some of those things do play out in our current culture. All right, but let's go on and let's look at three different individuals that took religion and also worked social activism into it. And so we're going to look at Christianity, Islam, and Hinduism. So in social activism, social action, we mean this is what an individual does within society to promote some type of change. And of course, we look at our world, not just in 2020, but just in general, there are so many things that need to be changed. Injustices with so many different groups of people, health care. We look at different neighborhoods and say, why is this neighborhood more privileged than the other? So when we talk about social action, it's about getting into society, into the culture in which one finds him or herself, and making some type of change. Social activity is so central to every religion because every religion finds itself in a society, in culture, whether that society is poor or whether it's doing well or whether it has a lot of diversity. Religions find themselves in cultures, and there are different and distinct changes and diversities that those cultures will undertake. Many religions, when you look back at how they were started, were birthed because something was wrong. Something just wasn't quite right. If you look at like Christianity breaks off from Judaism, breaks off from the Jewish culture because they were saying, well, look, we don't like how you're doing it over here, and God is all encompassing and we don't have to be so strict and stringent with things, and so that branched off into a new religion. So many religions are birthed because there is something discomforting in culture or in society, and a group of people desire something different, more sustaining. All right, and so now we are going to talk more about Christianity and social action. Then we'll talk about Islam, and then we will talk about Hinduism. And of course, our main focus here is going to be with Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. And he took Christianity and social action and put them hand in hand. But one of the really interesting and cool things about Dr. King is although it was a Christian, but in his upbringing, in his education, especially in his college years and in seminary, he got a chance to study some theologians. Now remember, we talked about Karl Marx. in the beginning of this presentation, and here comes Karl Marx again. So Dr. King studied a lot of different thoughts and ideas. Marx was one, and Gandhi, Mahatma Gandhi was another one. And so he also studied another nonviolent activist by the name of Dr. A.J. Muste. And it helped him not to abandon Christianity, but it just helped him to understand what he held dear in Christianity as well were some other things that other religions held dear as well. Loving others, not hurting people. And so he wanted to learn more about those facets. And so through studying Gandhi and other philosophers, it taught King that love is the central thing, that this is the central action that we need in order to make change. And Dr. King said if we're going to have our basis on love, we have to focus on nonviolent resistance, not taking a gun or beating somebody over the head. He said that that love or that respect can be shown through nonviolent resistance. And so Dr. King, as he spoke, not just to black people, but to all people, love was a central message that he wanted people to understand. And so over here, I want you to also to remember from Dr. King as he became a key central figure in the 1960s civil rights movement in America. He believed that nonviolent resistance was going to birth a lot of other things, that a beloved community would be birthed, that redemption on both sides, whites and blacks and other cultures, would be a product of that resistance, and reconciliation, reconciling people of different faiths, of different backgrounds to each other. That's what Dr. King had in mind with loving others. And, you know, a lot of people did not agree. A lot of churches did not agree. A lot of Christians did not agree with Dr. King's nonviolent protest. They wanted it to be more violent. And hence, you know, you see other groups such as the Black Panther started because they did not agree with the nonviolent approach. Now we're going to take a look at Islam. We're going to take a look at Malcolm X and his push for social change. Now, Malcolm X did not agree, and Islam, or the Nation of Islam, did not agree with King's teaching for social change, with the passivity, the nonviolent protests. They didn't really agree with that. But I want to go back a little bit with Malcolm X. Now, he had an experience with Christianity, and so he had a background with it, but a lot of his background with Christianity as he grew up as a kid was very negative. So he joins the Nation of Islam as he becomes an adult. He runs into, if you've heard anything or read about his background, he had a very tumultuous upbringing, but it did not stop him from doing great things. You know, he went to jail for a while, but when he came out, he really turned his life around. He joins the Nation of Islam. And if you want to get any more information about Nation of Islam and Islam itself, I want you to go to your textbook and go to page 121. But as he studies in the NOI, he studies under Elijah Muhammad, and he gets a lot of his teachings from him. And Muhammad's teachings were that you're going to find salvation or freedom or a better way of life from fighting or overcoming the structures that white Americans had put in place. And many times, you know, if you listen to Elijah Muhammad's rhetoric, they were called white devils and things like that. The NOI called for blacks to come out of any type of oppression that white America had put on them. They called them to reject any type of discrimination or living in areas that did not appreciate them. They wanted them to fight back by any means necessary. And it's really interesting. I want you to look at this quote I have here, and it sounds real different from King. Malcolm X said, "Do nothing unto anyone that you would not like to have done unto yourself. Seek peace and never be the aggressor. But if anyone attacks you, we do not teach you to turn the other cheek. And that was totally in opposition to the Christian nonviolent movement that King was pushing. But, so there's a big but here. Malcolm X had kind of a change of heart. A lot of things happened as he moved away from the Nation of Islam and kind of had a lot of friction with Elijah Muhammad. He goes on a Hajj, and remember that word Hajj. He takes a pilgrimage to Mecca, and his mind, his spirit is changed to other people. And he says, wait a minute, everyone is here and welcoming of me, and we're all in one accord. And it's really interesting how he comes back from that pilgrimage, and he writes this letter to his wife, and he says, you know, I am forever changed, that now I realize that even a white person who worships Allah as well can be my brother or sister. So we see here with Islam, and primarily here with Malcolm X, their push for social change was very different from the Christian push for social change. And the Muslim, Islam was really pushing for Black Americans to be financially independent, to support their communities, and to support others. Okay. All right, and let's head on down, and we're going to talk about Hinduism here, and we're going to talk about Vinoba Bhavi. And I want to highlight just a few things about Hinduism that are maybe different from other religions. Now, Hinduism does not have a central leader or a central text like some other religions may have. It doesn't have like a central Bible or anything like that, and there's not one set thing that you have to do. But they do have certain beliefs. They believe in karma. You know, what you do, cause and effect, those things will come back to you. They do believe, where I should work from the top, they do believe that there is a unity of all life, that we're all together in this thing. They do believe that your reality and that your soul are one and the same. And they do believe that in certain rules and their values concerning social order, that you have a duty or responsibility to your world. Now, Vinoba is really big. Now I want you to understand that he didn't necessarily call himself a Hindu, but he followed the teachings of Gandhi, who was Hindu. So here's the thing. He didn't really claim a religion himself, okay? But he embraced a lot of different traditions. And one of the things that Vinoba said is that the basis, if you're going to do something and be nonviolent, the basis of that is fearlessness. Fearlessness. And so Vinoba also said that nonviolence is a person's responsibility to your society. You have to be committed to be nonviolent to others. Now, another thing that he did in order to push social change and change things is he said, look, it's not just to be nonviolent, and meaning that we're not going to fight, but we have to have compassion for our fellow man, for our fellow sister, and that we have to do good things to others, for others. And one of the really cool things is, you read more about Vinoba in the book, is that he walked door to door in India, and he prompted and promoted people to do good. And one of the things he asked them to do was to give land. Land is very important, but to give land to those people who were poor and less fortunate. Imagine that. So he really pushed, and he really pushed for women to be included in the fight for equality, and that was his gift to social change in India. Okay, just a few questions to ponder before we close. Are religion and nonviolence natural allies? Do you think they naturally go together? You know, do you think that religion helps people to be nonviolent in protests or in social action? Do you need religion in order to effectively engage in social and political problems? Like, is that a requirement? Does religion offer us some type of basis for making changes in our world? Here's another thing to think about. Do religions and their practices teach fearlessness? Remember, Vinoba said that if we're going to be nonviolent, that is a good thing, but we also have to have the basis of fearlessness. We can't, just be nonviolent and be fearful. So sometimes religion may give us that basis that we're going to be all right. It gives us faith. Okay. All right, everybody. I hope that you're learning a lot, and we'll see you again next week.